The first-class cabin of Flight 882 was supposed to be a sanctuary of silence and champagne, but in seconds it became a crime scene of arrogance. Mia Reynolds stood in the aisle, staring at the man sprawled in seat 1A, her seat. He didn't just take her spot. He laughed in her face, calling her confused. He thought he was untouchable. He thought the rules didn't apply to men like him. But he didn't know that the woman standing over him was not just a passenger. She was the reason he still had a job. 5 minutes later, the engines cut, the pilot spoke, and Paxton Montgomery learned that karma doesn't just knock. It breaks down the door. The air inside John F. Kennedy International Airport hummed with the specific, frenetic energy of a Friday evening. Outside, the floor-to-ceiling windows of the terminal for lounge, rain lashed against the glass, blurring the runway lights into streaks of amber and crimson. Inside, however, the atmosphere was temperature-controlled, scented with white tea and thyme, and blissfully detached from the chaos of the economy gates. Mia Reynolds adjusted the collar of her cream-colored cashmere coat, her fingers brushing against the cold screen of her smartphone. The screen displayed a single notification: merger confirmed. Signatures required in London by 0900 GMT at 34. Mia was the youngest CEO in the history of Apex Logistics, a company that had recently swallowed 3 smaller competitors whole. She was tired. It was a bone-deep exhaustion that felt like lead weights sewn into the lining of her skin. She hadn't slept in 36 hours, fueling herself on espresso and the sheer adrenaline of closing a 9-figure deal. All she wanted was seat 1A, a glass of sparkling water, and 8 hours of uninterrupted silence on the flight to Heathrow. Miss Reynolds, the gate agent, a young man named Leo with a bright smile, beckoned her forward. "We are ready for you. Thank you for flying global premiere." Near offered a weary but genuine smile. "Thanks, Leo. Rough weather out there. Captain says it should clear up once you hit cruising altitude. You're the first to board." She nodded, scanning her digital boarding pass. The beep was a sharp, satisfying sound of permission. She walked down the jet bridge, the sound of her heels muffled by the industrial carpet. The transition from the terminal to the aircraft always felt like stepping into a different dimension. The air pressure changed, the smell shifted to recycled oxygen and leather, and the noise of the world fell away. She was supposed to be the first passenger on board. That was the perk of global premier status. But as she turned left into the first-class cabin, she stopped dead in her tracks. The cabin was dimly lit, bathed in soothing blue LED lights. The private suites were arranged in a 1-to-1 configuration, offering maximum privacy. But Suite 1A, her suite, the one she had specifically booked 3 months ago because it was the furthest from the galley, noise, was occupied. A man was sitting there. He looked to be in his late 50s, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, but fit him poorly around the midsection. His hair was a silver-gray sweep, perfectly coiffed, and his face held the ruddy complexion of someone who enjoyed expensive scotch a little too often. He had already made himself comfortable. His jacket was folded carelessly over the ottoman. His shoes were off, revealing patterned socks, and he was currently loudly chewing on a handful of warmed nuts. Nia checked her phone again. Seat 1A. She looked at the brass placard on the seat wall. 1A composing herself. She dealt with hostile board members, aggressive competitors, and volatile markets daily. A seat mix-up was trivial. "Excuse me," Nia said, her voice calm and melodic, cutting through the low hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power. The man didn't look up. He continued scrolling through a tablet, his finger jabbing at the glass with unnecessary force. Nia stepped closer, entering his peripheral vision. "Sir," he finally glanced up, his eyes narrowing as if he were looking at a smudge on a pristine window. He looked her up and down, taking in her sneakers. She always changed into comfort wear for flights. Her natural hair pulled back into an elegant bun, and her lack of visible designer logos. "Service doesn't start until we're in the air," he barked, turning back to his tablet. "And get me a gin and tonic." Heavy on the gin. The silence that followed was heavy. Nia blinked, the insult landing with a dull thud. He thought she was the flight attendant. "I'm not the flight attendant," Nia said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming sharper. "I'm a passenger, and you are in my seat." The man stopped chewing. He slowly turned his head, looking at her with a mixture of amusement and irritation. Your seat. Yes, seat 1A. Nia held up her phone, displaying the boarding pass. I believe you might be mistaken. Perhaps you're in 1K. The man laughed. It was a wet, dismissive sound. I'm not mistaken, sweetheart. I'm Paxton Montgomery. I always sit in 1A. It's my lucky seat now. Why don't you run along and find an empty spot in the back? I'm sure there's plenty of room near the toilets. Nia felt the heat rise in her chest, a familiar fire she had learned to control over a decade in the corporate world. Paxton Montgomery. The name rang a bell, but she couldn't place it immediately. It sounded like old money, or perhaps just old arrogance. Mr. Montgomery, Nia said, keeping her posture rigid. I don't care if you are the King of England. You are sitting in the seat I paid for. I need you to move. Paxton sighed, snapping his tablet case shut. He looked around the empty cabin, then back at her. Look, I'm tired. I have a very important meeting in London with a company called Reynolds Dynamics. I don't have time to play musical chairs with someone who probably used miles to upgrade. Go find another seat. Nia froze. Reynolds Dynamics. The shock was so sudden it almost made her laugh. Reynolds Dynamics was her company. It was the parent company of Apex. She was the Reynolds of Reynolds Dynamics. This man was flying to London to meet her, but he didn't know her face. Why would he? She kept a low profile. She let her coos handle the press. She was the architect in the shadows, not the mascot on the billboard. A slow, dangerous smile tugged at the corner of Nia's mouth. You're meeting with Reynolds Dynamics, yes, Paxton said, puffing out his chest slightly. I'm acquiring them, or saving them, really. Now, are we done here? You're blocking my light. He wasn't acquiring them. That was a lie, if anything. He was likely a vendor or a mid-level partner trying to renew a contract. But the audacity was breathtaking. Sir, a new voice cut in. Sarah, the lead flight attendant, appeared behind Nia. She looked flustered, holding a manifest. She looked at Nia, then at Paxton. Is there a problem? There is, Nia said, stepping back to let Sarah see the intruder. Mr. Montgomery seems to have mistaken seat 1A for his own. I have the boarding pass. Sarah looked at Paxton. Sir, may I see your boarding pass, please? Paxton groaned, rolling his eyes theatrically. He dug into his jacket pocket and retrieved a crumpled piece of paper, thrusting it at Sarah. Sarah scanned it, her face paling slightly. Mr. Montgomery, this boarding pass is for seat 4F. That's in business class, not first. And sir, this flight is fully booked in first. So Paxton waved a hand. Upgrade me. I'm a Diamond Elite member. I fly this airline 3 times a month. I can't just upgrade you, sir, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. This seat is paid for by Miss Reynolds. You need to return to your assigned seat. Paxton stood up. He wasn't particularly tall, but he used his bulk to intimidate. He loomed over Sarah, ignoring Nia completely. Now listen to me. I am not moving to business class. I have back problems. I need the suite. If she wants a seat, she can take mine in 4F. It's a fair trade. She looks like she could use the exercise walking back there. Mia's hands curled into fists at her sides. The microaggressions were piling up like bricks. Sweetheart service. The back exercise. I am not taking for F, Nia said, her voice ice cold. I paid $12,000 for the suite, Mr. Montgomery. Get out. Paxton turned on her, his face flushing red. Listen, you little. Sarah interjected, stepping between them. Please, lower your voice. I will not lower my voice. Paxton shouted, the sound echoing through the cabin as other passengers began to board. A young couple settled into 2A and to K, watching the scene with wide eyes. I am Paxton Montgomery. I make more money in a week than you do make in a lifetime. I am not moving for some diversity hire who got lucky with a credit card. The air in the cabin seemed to vanish. The insult hung there, ugly and undeniable. Nia stared at him. She didn't blink. She didn't scream. She simply processed the data. He was belligerent. He was discriminatory. And he was currently trespassing. Sarah, Nia said softly, not taking her eyes off Paxton. Is the captain available? I can get him, Sarah stammered. Don't bother. Paxton sneered. He sat back down, buckling his seatbelt. "Call the captain, call the Pope. I'm not moving unless you want to drag me off. I suggest you find another place to sit. The plane leaves in 15 minutes. Your choice." He put his noise-canceling headphones on and closed his eyes. Nia looked at Sarah. The flight attendant looked near tears. "Miss Reynolds, I am so sorry. I can call security, but it will delay the flight by at least an hour. We'll miss our slot. We have a tailwind. If we miss the slot, we might be grounded for the night." Nia looked at the time. She had to be in London by 9 a.m. A cancellation would cost her the merger. It would cost her company billions. Paxton Montgomery was banking on her desperation. He was weaponizing her own schedule against her. He knew she wouldn't delay the flight. He won, also, he thought. "Fine," Nia said. Sarah blinked. "Mom, I said fine," Nia repeated, her voice eerily calm. "I will take seat for F." Paxton didn't hear her, but he felt the victory. He smirked, keeping his eyes closed. "Are you sure?" Sarah whispered, "We can refund you. We can give you vouchers." "I don't want a voucher, Sarah," Nia said, pulling out her phone again. She began typing a text message. Her thumbs moved with lethal precision. "I want you to make sure he gets his gin and tonic. Let him get comfortable. Okay." Mia turned and walked out of the first-class cabin. She walked past the galley, past the curtain, and found seat for F. It was a nice seat, certainly, but it wasn't the one she bought, and it wasn't the principal. She sat down in for F, ignoring the confused glances of the passengers around her who had seen her board first. She opened her secure messaging app. She found the contact labeled Global Security Operations. High priority. She typed, "Identify passenger Paxton Montgomery, Flight 88 to JFK-LHR. Cross-reference with vendor list for Reynolds Dynamics. Apex immediate hold on all active contracts. Flagged for security risk. Corporate espionage, not fraud. Authorization code NR Alpha 99. She hit send. Then she sat back and waited. The plane doors closed. The safety video began to play. Paxton Montgomery was sipping his gin and 1A, thinking he had bullied his way to the top. But the flight time to the runway was 15 minutes. Nia checked her watch. Tick-tock. Paxton. The Boeing 7 Nasser Alman 7 pushed back from the gate. The rumble of the engines vibrated through the floorboards. In seat 4, Nia Reynolds buckled her seatbelt. The business class cabin was full. A sea of laptops and suits. But Nia kept her area dark. She didn't pull out her laptop. She didn't order a drink. She sat in the stillness of a predator, waiting in the tall grass. Her phone buzzed. A reply from her chief of security, a man named David Thorne, formerly of MI6, who never slept. Confirmed, Paxton Montgomery, VP Sales, Stratton Brothers. Stratton is currently under review for a supplier contract with our UK division. Note, we also found irregularities in his expense reports, filed under Client Entertainment. Link to our account. Do you want to proceed with the red flag protocol? Nia's thumbs flew across the screen. Proceed, full audit. And David, call the airport police at JFK. Tell them we have reason to believe a passenger on Flight 882 is in possession of stolen corporate property belonging to Reynolds Dynamics. Copy that on it. Technically, it wasn't a lie. The property was the seat he had stolen it. But in the legal world, corporate property could be interpreted broadly. And right now, Nia was in the mood for broad interpretations. But more importantly, if he was submitting fake expense reports to her company, that was fraud. Wire fraud. The plane began to taxi. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miller. We're currently number 4 for takeoff, and we should be airborne in about 10 minutes. Flight time is a quick 6 hours and 20 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the service." Mia looked out the window at the rain-slicked tarmac. She could imagine Paxton in one. He was probably reclining the seat now, perhaps asking Sarah for a refill. He was feeling the smug satisfaction of a man who had put a woman in her place. He probably thought he would land in London, meet the Reynolds executives, whom he assumed were old white men like him, and laugh about the encounter over scotch. She closed her eyes. She almost felt pity for him. Almost. Up in first class. Paxton was indeed having a wonderful time. "More nuts," he said, shaking the empty ramekin at Sarah as she passed. Sarah, whose jaw was tight with suppressed anger, took the bowl. "Certainly, sir." "And tell the pilot to smooth it out," Paxton grumbled, gesturing to the window. "It's bumpy on the ground. I pay for a smooth ride." "We are on a taxiway, sir. The pavement is uneven," Sarah replied through gritted teeth. "Excuses." Paxton muttered. He adjusted his silk tie. He felt invincible. He had bullied the gate agent, ignored the flight attendant, and displaced a passenger. And the world had bent to his will. It always did. He pulled out his phone to send a text to his mistress in London. "Upgrade secured. Nobody tried to claim my seat. Handled it. See you for dinner." He hit send just as the plane turned a sharp corner onto the active taxiway. Suddenly, the plane stopped. It wasn't a gradual slowdown. It was a firm, decided halt. The momentum threw Paxton forward slightly against his seat belt. He frowned. They weren't on the runway yet. He looked out the window. They were on a side taxiway. The engines spooled down from their high-pitched whine to a low idle. "What now?" Paxton groaned loudly. "Hey, stewardess." Sarah appeared, looking confused herself. "I'm not sure, sir. Traffic likely, but it wasn't traffic." In seat 4, Fnia felt the stop. She checked her phone. Message from David Thorne. "JFK Tower notified. Port Authority police dispatched. They are intercepting the aircraft. You might want to look out the window." Nia looked in the distance, cutting through the gloom and the rain. She saw the flashing blue and red lights. Two squad cars and a black SUV were racing across the tarmac, heading straight for Flight A22. A small, satisfied sigh escaped her lips. The intercom clicked. Captain Miller's voice sounded different this time, tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We've been ordered by air traffic control to hold our position here on the taxiway. We have a security situation that requires immediate attention. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We expect to have more information shortly." A ripple of murmurs went through the cabin. People shifted in their seats. Anxiety spiked in the post-9/11's world security situation. That was the phrase no one wanted to hear. Paxton, in one, huffed, "Unbelievable. Probably someone left a bag unattended. Incompetence everywhere." He took another sip of his gin, oblivious to the fact that the flashing lights were reflecting off the aluminum hull of the plane, getting brighter and brighter. Nia watched as the police cars pulled up to the mobile stairs that were being driven out to the plane. The ground crew was already moving. This wasn't just a seat dispute anymore. This was a corporate execution. Nia typed one last message to David. "Make sure the press release is ready for tomorrow morning. Stratton Brothers VP indicted for fraud." She put her phone in flight mode, not because she had to, but because she wanted to enjoy the show without distractions. The front cabin door opened. A gust of cold, wet air swirled into the plane. 3 officers from the Port Authority Police Department stepped onto the aircraft, followed by a man in a dark suit who held a tablet. Sarah met them at the door. "Officers, what is going on?" The lead officer, a burly man with a rain-soaked jacket, looked at a paper in his hand. "We need to remove a passenger. Federal warrant." Paxton Montgomery heard the commotion. He craned his neck, trying to see. Finally, he muttered, "Get the troublemakers off so we can fly." He had no idea that the man in the dark suit was pointing directly at seat 1. The silence in the first-class cabin was absolute, shattered only by the heavy, rhythmic thud of police boots on the carpet. The blue lead mood lighting, usually designed to soothe, now felt cold and clinical, like an operating theater. Paxton Montgomery didn't look up as the officers approached. He was busy typing a furious email to the airline's customer service department, demanding compensation for the unacceptable delay caused by security incompetence. He took a swig of his gin and tonic, the ice clinking softly against the glass. "Mr. Montgomery," the voice was deep, authoritative, and brooked no argument. Paxton sighed. Exasperated, he assumed the police were asking for witness statements regarding whatever incident was happening in the back. He spun the expensive noise-canceling headphones off one ear. "Look, officer, I didn't see anything. I've been sitting here minding my own business. Go ask the people in economy. The lead officer, whose badge identified him as Sergeant Kowalski, didn't blink. He stood in the aisle, blocking the exit behind him. The man in the suit, an airline security liaison, held up an iPad. "We're not asking for a witness statement, sir," Kowalski said, his voice carrying through the quiet cabin. "We have a warrant to remove you from this aircraft." Paxton froze. The glass of gin paused halfway to his mouth. "Excuse me. You need to grab your belongings and come with us now." Paxton let out a short, incredulous laugh. He looked around the cabin, seeking allies. The young couple into A and to K were staring, their phones discreetly raised, recording. "Is this a joke?" Paxton asked, his face turning a shade of plum. "I'm a Diamond Elite member. I'm a vice president at Stratton Brothers." "You have the wrong man. You are Paxton James Montgomery," Kowalski asked, reading from a digital sheet. March 12, 1968. "Yes, but then we have the right man. You are being detained for questioning regarding active wire fraud, corporate espionage, and theft of services." "Theft of services?" Paxton sputtered. "I paid for this flight. I have a ticket." "You have a ticket for seat 4F," the airline liaison interjected calmly. "You are currently occupying seat 1A after being explicitly told to vacate by the purchaser and the flight crew. That constitutes theft of services under federal aviation guidelines. But the fraud charge, that comes from the FBI." "Sir," the blood drained from Paxton's face. The mention of the FBI hit him like a physical blow. The creative accounting he had been doing with the Reynolds Dynamics account, padding expenses, diverting kickbacks to a shell company, was supposed to be buried deep. How could they know? He had only been sitting here for 20 minutes. "This is a mistake," Paxton said, his voice rising to a shout. "I am flying to London to sign a merger. If you take me off this plane, you will be sued into oblivion. Do you know who I am meeting? Reynolds Dynamics. They own half this airport." In seat 4F, Nia Reynolds listened to the commotion. She couldn't see him, but she could hear every desperate word. A faint, razor-sharp smile touched her lips. "Oh, Paxton," she thought. "You have no idea, sir. Stand up," Kowalski ordered, his hand resting on the handcuffs at his belt. "No," Paxton screamed. He grabbed the armrests of the suite. "I'm not moving. This is harassment. I want my lawyer." Kowalski didn't waste time. He nodded to his partner. The two officers moved with practiced efficiency. One grabbed Paxton's left arm, the other his right. They hauled him out of the seat like a sack of flour. Paxton kicked out his expensive Oxford shoe, connecting with the plastic divider. "Get your hands off me," he bellowed. "I am a CEO. Well, almost. I am a powerful man." "You're under arrest," Kowalski grunted, spinning Paxton around and slamming him against the suite wall to cuff him. The click of the metal ratchets was the loudest sound in the world. Sarah, the flight attendant, stood by the galley, her hands over her mouth. She looked terrified, but also undeniably relieved. Paxton was red-faced, sweating, his perfectly coiffed hair now disheveled. "You will pay for this, all of you. I'll buy this airline just to fire you." Kowalski commanded, "Walk." They marched him down the aisle. The walk of shame was brutal as they dragged him from first class toward the exit door. They had to pass the front row of business class. They had to pass seat 4F. Nia Reynolds was waiting. She had turned her seat light on, illuminating her face. She held a glass of sparkling water, looking calm, regal, and utterly unbothered. As the officers shoved Paxton past her row, he locked eyes with her. He recognized her. Not as the CEO, he still didn't put that together, but as the woman he had insulted. The woman he had told to go find a seat near the toilets. Nia raised her glass slightly in a mock toast. "Have a safe trip, Mr. Montgomery." Paxton's eyes bulged. He realized then that this wasn't a coincidence. "You," he hissed, struggling against the cuffs. "You did this. Who are you?" "I'm the person who actually paid for seat 1A, Nia said smoothly and frankly. "I think you're going to miss your meeting." "Keep moving," the officer barked, shoving Paxton forward. "She's a witch." Paxton screamed as he was dragged out the door and onto the rain-slicked mobile stairs. "She's a nobody. I'll ruin you." The heavy aircraft door slammed shut, cutting off his tirade. The sudden silence that followed was heavy, ringing in the ears of every passenger. Sarah, the flight attendant, exhaled a long, shaky breath. She looked at the empty seat, then at the business class cabin. She walked over to Nia. "Miss Reynolds," Sarah's voice was trembling, "we are ready to depart. The captain would like to know if you would like to reclaim your seat." Nia unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, smoothing down her coat. She looked at the passengers in business class, who were staring at her with a mix of awe and curiosity. "Thank you, Sarah," Nia said. "I believe I will." The transition back to seat 1A was treated with the solemnity of a coronation. Sarah had already stripped the bedding and replaced every item Paxton had touched. New pillows, new blankets, a fresh amenity kit. She had even wiped down the hard surfaces with disinfectant wipes twice. Nia settled into the suite. The familiar comfort wrapped around her, but the adrenaline was still humming in her veins. "Miss Reynolds," a deep voice came from the front. Nia looked up to see Captain Miller standing there. He had left the cockpit briefly while they waited for a new takeoff slot. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a grave expression. "Captain," Nia nodded. "I wanted to personally apologize for the incident," Miller said, removing his cap. "I was not informed of the nature of the dispute until the police contacted the tower. Had I known a passenger had commandeered your seat and abused you, I would have returned to the gate immediately on my own authority." "Thank you, Captain," Nia said softly. "It was an educational experience. We've offloaded his luggage." Miller continued, "We're cleared for immediate takeoff. We'll make up the time in the air. Can I get you anything before I head back up front?" "Just a smooth flight," Captain Miller smiled, a genuine crinkle of his eyes. "That I can promise." 10 minutes later, Flight 882 roared down the runway. As the wheels lifted off the tarmac, leaving the lights of New York behind, Nia finally allowed herself to relax. She watched the city turn into a grid of glowing embers below. Once the seatbelt sign pinged off, the service began. Sarah appeared instantly with a bottle of Dom Perignon. "On the house, Miss Reynolds." "For the trouble." Nia accepted the glass. She booted up her laptop and connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. It was fast, global premiere standard. She opened her browser and checked the news. It hadn't hit the major networks yet, but Twitter X was already bubbling. The couple into internet influencers apparently had uploaded the video. Flight 882. Instant karma didn't show seat stealer. The video showed Paxton screaming, "Do you know who I am?" while being handcuffed. It had 50,000 views in 20 minutes. Nia switched tabs to her secure work email. David Thorne had sent a dossier. Subject, Paxton Montgomery. Full profile. The PDF was 20 pages long. Nia scanned it as she sipped her champagne. It was worse than she thought. Paxton wasn't just arrogant. He was incompetent. He had been skimming off the top of the logistics budget for 3 years. He was gambling heavy debts in Atlantic City. He was desperate. The merger he talked about wasn't a merger. Nia read the internal emails David had intercepted. Stratton Brothers was trying to sell itself to Reynolds Dynamics because they were insolvent. Paxton was coming to beg, not to buy. And he was trying to hide the missing millions before the Reynolds auditors. Nia's team looked at the books. He had insulted the only person who could have saved his company. Nia looked out the window at the black abyss of the Atlantic. She felt a strange sense of melancholy. Men like Paxton Montgomery had been obstacles her entire life. In business school, they spoke over her in pitch meetings. They asked her to get the coffee when she became CEO. They whispered that she was a diversity hire, ignoring her dual degrees from Wharton and Met. She had always fought them with silence, with excellence, with numbers. But tonight she had used a hammer, and it felt good. "Excuse me," Nia turned. The woman from seat to K was standing at the entrance of her suite. She was young, maybe 25, with bright pink hair and a hesitant smile. "I'm sorry to bother you," the girl said. "I just saw what happened, and I saw you get your seat back." "That was the coolest thing I've ever seen," Nia smiled. "He sat in the wrong seat. I think he messed with the wrong woman." The girl corrected, "I'm Chloe. I just wanted to say thanks. Guys like that usually get away with it. It was nice to see one lose." "Karma has a schedule," Chloe, Nia said sometimes it just needs a little help. Chloe grinned and went back to her seat. Nia turned back to her laptop. She had 6 hours until London. She opened the presentation deck for the meeting with Stratton Brothers. She deleted the slide titled Proposed Partnership Structure. She created a new slide in bold black letters. She typed acquisition conditions, total leadership restructure. She began to type a list of names to be terminated immediately. Paxton Montgomery was at the top, but he wasn't alone. She added the CFO who signed off on his expenses. She added the HR director who had ignored 3 previous harassment complaints against him, also found in David's dossier. She worked through the night, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in her eyes, while Paxton was likely sitting in a holding cell at JFK explaining to a federal agent why he had Reynolds Dynamics corporate data on his personal iPad. Nia was dismantling his entire legacy from 38,000 feet. By the time the sun began to rise, painting the horizon in streaks of violet and gold, the file was ready. Sarah came by with hot coffee. "Breakfast, Miss Reynolds, just fruit, please, Sarah. I have a lunch meeting. I need to be hungry." The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Good morning, folks. We're beginning our descent into London Heathrow. The weather is typical London, gray and drizzly, 12 degrees Celsius. We'll be on the ground in 30 minutes. Nia closed her laptop and went to the lavatory to freshen up. She brushed her teeth, reapplied her lipstick, a deep commanding red, and smoothed her hair. She looked in the mirror. The exhaustion was still there under the eyes, but the fire was brighter. She wasn't just Nia Reynolds, the tired traveler. She was the CEO of Reynolds Dynamics, and she was coming to collect. Heathrow's Terminal 5 was a hive of activity. Nia breezed through the private customs channel, her global premier status ensuring she didn't wait in line. Her driver, a stoic man named Arthur, was waiting with a placard that simply read NR. "Good morning, Miss Reynolds," Arthur said, taking her sleek carry-on bag. "Traffic into the city is heavy. An hour and 10 minutes. That's fine, Arthur. Get me to the Shard." The car was a black Mercedes S-Class, quiet and dark. Nia watched the English countryside give way to the industrial sprawl of London. She checked her phone. David Thorne had sent an update. Montgomery released on bail 1 hour ago. His passport has been surrendered, but he's trying to fly on a domestic ID to get to a partner office in D.C. He's panicked. But here's the kicker. He called into the Stratford board meeting via Zoom. He told them he was delayed by a security mix-up and blames the airline. Nia laughed out loud. He was doubling down. He hadn't told his bosses he was arrested. He hadn't told them he was under investigation for fraud. He was lying to the end. "Arthur," Nia said, "do we have a video link capability in the car?" "Yes, madam. The rear screens are connected." "Good, don't connect me yet. Just have it ready." They arrived at the Shard, the jagged glass skyscraper that pierced the gray London sky. Reynolds Dynamics occupied the top 5 floors. Stratton Brothers, a legacy shipping firm, had rented a conference room on the 30th floor for this meeting. Trying to look impressive for their potential buyers, Mia stepped out of the car. The wind whipped her coat around her legs. She walked into the lobby, her heels clicking on the marble. Security recognized her instantly. "Miss Reynolds, elevators are locked for you." She ascended, her stomach giving a small flutter, not of nerves but of anticipation. On the 30th floor, the atmosphere was tense. The conference room was glass-walled, offering a panoramic view of the city. Inside, 5 men in gray suits sat around a mahogany table. They were the executive board of Stratton Brothers. They looked nervous. Their star negotiator, Paxton, was missing. At the head of the table sat their CEO, a man named Richard Stratton. He was 70, tired, and looking at a speakerphone in the center of the table. "Paxton, I can barely hear you," Richard was saying. "Where are you?" From the speaker, Paxton's voice crackled, distorted and tinny. "I told you, Richard. The airline is a disaster. I'm stuck at JFK, but I can lead the meeting from here. Just put me on the big screen when the Reynolds girl gets there." The Reynolds girl. The room went silent. Outside the glass doors near Reynolds stopped. She had heard it. She signaled to her assistant, who was waiting by the door, "Open it." The double glass doors swung open. Mia Reynolds walked in. She didn't walk fast. She moved with the slow, inevitable momentum of a glacier. She threw her coat onto an empty chair. The 5 men scrambled to stand up. "Miss Reynolds," Richard Stratton stammered, "we weren't expecting you for another 10 minutes. And we apologize. Our VP is—" "I know where your VP is," Mia said, her voice projecting clearly to the speakerphone. "Who is that?" Paxton's voice barked from the speaker. "Is she there? Put me on video." Richard fumbled with the remote, and the large screen on the wall flickered to life. There was Paxton Montgomery. He looked terrible. He was clearly in an airport lounge, but he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His tie was loose. His eyes were bloodshot. He was holding a phone up to his face. "Okay," Paxton said, squinting into his camera. "Gentlemen, sorry for the delay. Now let's handle this acquisition. Where is the Reynolds representative?" Mia stepped in front of the camera in the conference room. She looked directly into the lens. "Hello, Paxton," she said on the screen. Paxton dropped his phone. The image tumbled, showing a view of the ceiling of the Delta Sky Club before he fumbled and picked it back up. His face came back into view, pale as a sheet. "You," Paxton whispered. "Me," Mia agreed. Richard Stratton looked between them, confused. "Paxton, you know Miss Reynolds, Miss Reynolds," Paxton squeaked. "I tried to tell you," Mia said, leaning over the table, her hands flat on the polished wood. "I told you on the plane. I am Mia Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Dynamics, the woman whose seat you stole, the woman you called a diversity hire." The room erupted in gasps. The other 4 executives looked at Richard, their faces horrified. "He did what?" Richard whispered. "He also," Mia continued, pulling a file from her bag and sliding it across the table to Richard. "He has been embezzling approximately $4 million from your logistics budget over the last 3 years. My security team confirmed it while I was in the air." "That's a lie," Paxton screamed from the screen. "She's lying. She's crazy." "Richard, don't listen to her. I have the FBI case number right here." Mia pointed to the file. "He was arrested on my flight. He's out on bail right now. He isn't delayed. He is a felon." Richard Stratton opened the folder. He saw the photos of the arrest. He saw the bank transfer logs. He looked up at the screen. His face hardened into stone. "Paxton," Richard said, his voice shaking with rage. "Richard, wait. I can explain. You're fired," Richard said, "and you're muted." He hit the button. The room fell silent, though Paxton's face on the screen continued to contort in silent shouting. Richard turned the TV off completely. Richard sank into his chair. He looked old. He looked defeated. "Miss Reynolds, I don't know what to say. We are desperate for this deal. Please don't let the actions of one man reflect a culture that tolerates him," Mia said. "You let him operate like this for years. You let him think he was untouchable." She paused. She looked at the terrified board members. "However," Mia said, "I am a businesswoman, and Reynolds Dynamics needs a shipping partner. But the terms have changed." "Changed?" Richard asked, hope flickering in his eyes. "The price has gone down by 20%, Mia said, "and I want a full audit of every executive in this room. If I find 1 cent out of place, the deal is dead. And I want his office," she pointed to the empty chair. "I want it turned into a lactation room for female employees immediately." Richard nodded vigorously. "Done, all of it done." Mia smiled. It was a cold smile, but it was satisfied. "Good. Now, shall we order some tea?" I had a very eventful flight. While Mia Reynolds was redefining the future of European logistics in a glass tower in London, Paxton Montgomery was sitting on the edge of a stained mattress in a budget motel near Queens, New York. He had been released on bail, but the conditions were strict. His passport had been seized, and his bank accounts were frozen pending the federal investigation. He couldn't go home to his mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, because his wife Linda had changed the locks. The news had reached her before he did. Paxton sat in the dim light of the motel room, the smell of stale cigarette smoke clinging to the curtains. He held his phone, staring at the screen with bloodshot eyes. He wasn't looking at his emails. Those had stopped coming hours ago when his company server access was revoked. He was looking at YouTube. The video titled "Racist CEO Kicked Off Flight 882," Instant Karma now had 4 million views. It wasn't just the arrest, it was the commentary. Thousands of comments rolled in every minute. Imagine telling the owner of the company she's a diversity hire. The way he ate those nuts, like he owned the place. Satisfying to watch. Nia Reynolds is a queen. That walk to seat for F was a power move. Paxton scrolled, his thumb trembling. He saw a clip from a major news network. The anchor was discussing the incident, and in a shocking turn of events, shares of Stratton Brothers plummeted 12% this morning before trading was halted. This comes after the revelation that their VP of sales, Paxton Montgomery, was arrested for wire fraud. Sources say the tip came from Nia Reynolds herself, the CEO acquiring the failing firm. It seems Mr. Montgomery didn't just lose his seat, he lost the company. Paxton threw the phone against the wall. It cracked, but the screen stayed on. Glowing accusingly in the corner, he put his head in his hands. How had it gone so wrong so fast? He had spent 30 years building a reputation. He was a shark, he was a closer. He was supposed to be untouchable. He remembered the look in Nia's eyes when she toasted him with her water glass. It wasn't hate, it was pity. That burned worse than anything. She hadn't needed to scream. She hadn't needed to fight. She just used the rules he thought he was above, to crush him. There was a knock at the door. Paxton jumped. Who is it? Room service, a muffled voice said. Paxton frowned. This motel didn't have room service. He moved to the peephole. He saw 2 men in suits standing in the hallway. They weren't police. They wore the distinct, sharp tailoring of high-end corporate lawyers. Paxton opened the door a crack. What do you want? One of the men held up a thick envelope. Mr. Montgomery, we represent the board of directors of Stratton Brothers. We are here to serve you with a lawsuit. The company is suing you for $50 million for breach of fiduciary duty, gross negligence, and reputational damage. Paxton laughed a dry, hysterical sound. I don't have $50 million. The feds froze my accounts. We know, the lawyer said, his face impassive. We are also serving an eviction notice for the company-leased property in Greenwich, and your wife's divorce attorney asked us to pass this along as well. He slid a second, thinner envelope through the crack in the door. Paxton stared at the papers. You have 24 hours to vacate the Greenwich property. The lawyer said, Good day, Mr. Montgomery. They walked away, their shoes clicking on the dirty linoleum of the motel hallway. Paxton slid down the door until he hit the floor. He was surrounded by the wreckage of his own hubris. He opened the envelope from his wife's lawyer. It was a restraining order and a petition for full custody of their dogs. Even the dogs didn't want him. He looked over at the cracked phone screen. The video was still playing on a loop. It showed the moment the police dragged him out of the suite. He looked small. He looked weak. He realized then that he would never work in this industry again. He wouldn't even be able to get a job at a checkout counter. His face was the face of failure. In London, the sun was setting. Nia Reynolds was sitting in a corner booth at a quiet, exclusive jazz club in Soho. She was alone, a rare moment of solitude. Her phone buzzed. It was David Thorne. Update: Montgomery has been served. He's currently holed up in a motel. Linda Montgomery has filed for divorce. The audit is 40% complete, and we found another $2 million in embezzled funds. The FBI is upgrading the charges to federal racketeering. Nia took a sip of her Pinot Noir. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel glee. She felt a deep, abiding sense of balance. The scales had tipped, and she had righted them. She typed back, Good work, David. Ensure the employees at Stratton who were victims of his harassment are offered counseling and compensation packages. I want to start clean. She put the phone down and listened to the saxophone player. The music was smooth, complex, and beautiful. She thought about the flight. She thought about the moment she walked to seat for F. It had been humiliating, yes, but it had given her the clarity she needed. It showed her exactly who she was dealing with. If Paxton had just been polite, if he had just moved his seat, he might still have a job. He might still be rich. He would have eventually been caught for the fraud, perhaps, but not like this. Not in a global spectacle. Miss Reynolds, the waiter appeared with a small plate of truffles. Compliments of the gentleman at the bar. He recognized you from the news. Nia looked over. A man raised his glass. He wasn't hitting on her. He was nodding, a gesture of respect. Nia nodded back. She wasn't just a CEO anymore. She was a symbol. She was the woman who didn't move to the back of the bus or the plane without buying the bus company first. 1 year later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony was held on a bright, crisp Tuesday morning. The new headquarters of Apex Stratton Logistics in London was a marvel of modern architecture, a gleaming structure of steel and glass that overlooked the Thames. The press was there in droves. Cameras flashed as Nia Reynolds stepped up to the podium. She wore a suit of electric blue, sharp and tailored, her hair in a proud, voluminous afro. She looked every inch the titan of industry she had become. "Thank you all for coming," Nia said, her voice amplified across the plaza. "Today marks not just the opening of a building, but the opening of a new chapter. A chapter defined by transparency, integrity, and respect." The crowd applauded. Behind her stood the new executive board. It was the most diverse board in the Fortune 500. Men and women of different races, ages, and backgrounds stood shoulder to shoulder. Among them was Sarah, the former flight attendant from Flight 882. Nia had hired her 6 months ago. Sarah was now the director of customer experience for the airline division of Apex. She had an eye for detail and a spine of steel, exactly what Nia valued. "When we acquired Stratton Brothers," Nia continued, "people said it was a risk. They said the culture was toxic. They were right, but toxins can be purged. Today our profits are up 30%. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and we have successfully launched the Montgomery Initiative." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd at the name. Yes, Nia smiled, allowing the irony to land. The Montgomery Initiative is our new scholarship and mentorship program for underrepresented minorities in logistics and aviation. We are taking the legacy of exclusion and turning it into a ladder for inclusion. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, Nia gave a private tour of the facility to the top investors. They walked through the open-plan offices, the high-tech control rooms, and the wellness centers. "And this," Nia said, stopping in front of a corner office on the top floor, "is our pride and joy." The plaque on the door read, "The Mother's Suite and Wellness Room." It was the office that had once belonged to Paxton Montgomery's predecessor. It was spacious, filled with natural light, comfortable nursing chairs, refrigerators for milk storage, and quiet pods for meditation. "This used to be an executive office," one investor noted, "prime real estate." "It still is," Nia said. "We just redefined who the VIPs are. The working mothers of this company contribute more to our efficiency than any single executive in a leather chair." As the tour disbanded, Nia retreated to her own office. It was modest compared to the Mother's Suite, functional and sleek. She sat at her desk and opened her personal laptop. She had a notification from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Inmate status update. Paxton James Montgomery. Location: FCI Otisville Federal Correctional Institution. Sentence: 8 years. Status: active. Nia looked at the photo. Paxton looked older, thinner. The arrogance was gone from his eyes, replaced by a hollow, haunted look. He was working in the prison laundry, earning 12 cents an hour. She closed the tab. She didn't need to see it anymore. The story was over. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the planes tracing white lines across the blue sky above London. Life was a series of flights. Some people thought they owned the plane. Some people just wanted to get to their destination. But Nia knew the truth. The only seat that mattered wasn't 1A or 4F. It was the seat at the head of the table, and she had earned hers. She picked up her phone and called Arthur, her driver, ready to go. "Miss Reynolds?" "Yes, Arthur." "Take me to the airport." "Going somewhere special, vacation," Nia said, smiling. "I booked a flight to the Maldives." "And Arthur?" "Yes, Mum. I checked the seat map 3 times. 1A is definitely mine." She grabbed her bag and walked out of the office, the click of her heels echoing like a gavel striking a sounding block. Case closed. That is the story of how Nia Reynolds turned a moment of disrespect into an empire of justice. Paxton Montgomery thought he could bully someone because he judged a book by its cover, but he didn't realize he was messing with the author of the whole library. He lost his job, his freedom, and his legacy in 5 minutes because he refused to check his ego at the gate. If you enjoyed this story of karma and corporate justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind or be prepared to be humbled. See you in the next video.